Okay, guys, welcome back to the channel, CalixBoxing.com, CalixBoxing 2.0 here on YouTube, CalixBoxing 2 over on Twitter, and make sure to be checking that community page daily to check out new articles that are up on the website on a daily basis. Today is going to be more on the educational side. We're here to entertain and educate and make the complex simple. And today is going to delve into more educational than entertainment-wise, and also to try to make the complex a little more simple. I noticed I'm one of the few people on YouTube who actually cite odds when we're talking about fights, when we talk about matchups, when we talk about previews, when we talk about predictions. I often cite the odds, and I think it's an important thing to do, to look at it that way, because these guys in Vegas, the odds makers, they know what they're looking at. They dive deep into fights. They look at things analytically. They look at trends coming in. They have insiders in both camps leading up to the fight. So you can get a good idea of what you're going to see in a fight when you're looking at the odds, when you look deep into the odds from top to bottom, from the top line all the way down to the prop bets. And it became very clear to me as weeks go on and I start talking about odds that people don't know simple terminology when it comes to betting. And it is an important thing to know going forward, because as gambling, as sports betting becomes more prevalent, as it's legalized state by state by state. I'm here in Louisiana. They legalized it here last year. As it becomes more prevalent, as sports betting gets legalized nationally, state by state by state, and worldwide, you're going to see more people looking at things this way, people using this terminology more so. And as I was talking to Chicano Prophet on El Chile on his podcast yesterday, shout out to him, it became abundantly clear that I needed to at least introduce people to certain simple terminology. This is betting 101, just simple stuff, but it's going to help people understand when they see this terminology, because you're going to see more of this on Showtime, on DAZN, on ESPN, on ESPN Plus, on all of these networks, them using betting odds. And when I start to say stuff like minus 120, plus 160, plus 450, trap fight, prop bets, this terminology, and people don't know it, it's not a good thing. So shout out to OJ22, shout out to Nando, shout out to Wheelchair Man John. And like I said, this is going to be more on the educational side. It's not going to be a long video. I just wanted to introduce people, and I'm going to be using screen share here, so bear with me, to simple terminology when it comes to betting, trying to make the complex more simple. And this is betting 101, because like I said, when I use this terminology, it became clear that people didn't know what minus meant. People don't know what plus means. People don't know over under and how an over under is set, and how you look at the odds from the top line all the way down to the smallest prop bet to get a picture of how Vegas sees a certain fight playing out. And let me pull up real quick my screen real quick. Let's see what we got. And I don't know if y'all see this. You can put in the comment if you see it or not. Like I said, this is my first time using screen share, so there may be some hiccups here. So y'all put in the comment section if y'all see my screen right here. Shout out to Boxing on the Edge in the building as well. And there'll be a lot of drinking water on this podcast as well, because I'm dealing with allergies horrifically right now. So bear with me on that as well. And put in the comment section if y'all see this screen share. But I'm going to start. This right here is the opening odds for Canelo Alvarez versus Gennady Golovkin, which is official now. And I think they just announced that the fight's going to be taking place in Las Vegas, September, which I'll be at that fight, the trilogy. But what you see right here, and this is Caesars, this is what I use. Screen share is up. That's good to see, and it confuses me. And that's why I'm doing this video. I just want, and Chicano Prophet in the building. Shout out to Chicano Prophet. And this is the reason that I wanted to do this video, is because I was talking to him yesterday, and it became abundantly clear that people just don't know simple terminology when it comes to betting. And I don't blame them, because it's people just want to watch fights, right? They just want to watch fights. But as you see betting get legalized state by state by state, as years go on, you're going to see more of this lingo. You're going to see more of this terminology. So I just wanted to introduce people to simple, this is basic stuff, simple betting 101 terminology. That way, when you're watching a fight on Showtime and they say something like Tank Davis is a minus 800 favorite, and Raleigh Romero is a plus 650 underdog, you'll know what they're talking about. But as you see right here, Canelo Alvarez minus 410, Gennady Golovkin plus 320. And this is how they do odds in America. They do it different in different countries. Some people use a fractional 11-4 odds, something like that. In America, this is how they do odds. They do it minus and plus. And what it means simply is this. And like I said, we're just going simple here. Betting 101. I don't want to confuse anybody. This is just so you know what people are talking about when you see odds. This means that you have to bet $410 to win $100 on Canelo Alvarez. The minus means that Canelo Alvarez is the favorite. The plus means Golovkin is the underdog. And people get that messed up all the time. And when I first started betting 15 years ago in college football, I got that wrong coming in. I was like, I thought the plus was the favorite and the minus was the underdog, but it's the opposite. What it means is Canelo Alvarez minus 410. You have to bet $410 on Canelo to win 100. If you bet $100 on Gennady Golovkin and he wins, you get $320 plus your $100 back if Gennady Golovkin were to win. That's how that works. Let me break it down once again. If you bet $410 on Canelo Alvarez to win, you win your $410 back plus $100. But you have to bet $410 in order to win $100. Just think of it in $100 mind frame. Gennady Golovkin, you can bet $100 since he's the underdog, and you win $320. Now, you don't have to bet what these odds tell you. In other words, you don't have to bet $410 on Canelo Alvarez. What they're saying is if you bet $41 on Canelo Alvarez, you would win $10 if he were to win the fight. Right? If you bet $10 on Gennady Golovkin, you would win $32 plus your $10 back if you were to bet on Gennady Golovkin. This is how this works. But simply stating, I'm trying to make this as simple as possible. The minus is the favorite. The plus is the underdog. So what Vegas is telling you right here is Canelo Alvarez is a clear and healthy favorite. Okay, so that's one example right there. And I'm going to give you an example right here of when you hear the terminology toss-up fight. And I'm about to pull up my screen share again. Now, this is a fight that I'm sure y'all see that right there. I see it up on my screen. This is a fight that I don't even think it's still an actual fight. I think Hughie Fury pulled out of the fight. He either pulled out of the fight or it's postponed. But it's a good example to use. Hughie Fury minus 110, Michael Hunter minus 110. This is a toss-up fight. It's a true toss-up fight. It's even money. If you were to bet $110 on Hughie Fury, you win $100 plus your money back. So if you were to bet 100 on Hughie Fury, you win $110. No, if you bet 110, you win $100 plus your money back. And the same thing with Michael Hunter. This is what's called a true toss-up fight. A true toss-up fight. Shout out to JC in the building, Steven4722 in the building, the GOAT Mario P. If you see a number with a minus, that's what you bet to win 100. The opposite is if you bet 100. That's right. But what I want people to understand most of all is the terminology. Minus is the favorite, plus is the underdog. And when you see something like this right here, minus 110, minus 110, that's what's called a true toss-up fight. It's even money. It can go either way. Vegas is saying, look, coin flip. I don't know who's going to win this fight. Coin flip. You can pick it either way. And that line may move. It is going to move. The line's constantly moving as the fight gets closer. And what you see on the fight weekend is generally the odds get closer. There are certain exceptions to that. Shakur Stevenson versus Oscar Valdez is one of them. as the fight got closer, the odds actually got wider. Oscar Valdez became more of an underdog. But generally what you see is people fly out to Vegas for fights. They throw a little bit of money down on the underdog that they're willing to lose, and those odds start to get closer. We just saw it this past weekend with Joe Smith Jr. when he was plus 550, which is, like I said, he's the underdog at plus 550. But as that number started to shrink, it got down to plus 450, which means if you see that plus number getting smaller, the odds are getting closer. But once again, what I want people to understand is the plus is the underdog, the minus is the favorite. And as you see those two numbers get closer, minus 110, that's a toss-up. Another example would be Errol Spence Jr. versus Terrence Crawford. I think the opening lines were plus 140 for Terrence Crawford and say minus 160 for Errol Spence Jr. They're saying Terrence Crawford is the underdog, but that line is still close. And that's what you call a live dog. When those lines are close and the underdog is, say, something like plus 160, close to 100, that's what's called a live dog. Chicano Prophet, are parlays safer in your opinion? I'm glad you asked this. And once again, terminology. A parlay is when you bet 2, 3, 4, and 3-game parlays or 3-fight parlays are very popular because you don't have to bet 5, 6 games, but a 3-bet parlay generally pays off 6.5 times your money, generally. All right, so if you were to bet $100 on a 3-game parlay or 3-fight parlay, and you hit on all 3, you would win $650. The reason that people play them so often is because of the payout. If you hit all 2 or all 3 or 4, the payout is higher. But the reason the payout is higher is they're more dangerous. They're not safer. They're more dangerous. And I tell people to stay away from parlays in general because they trap you into parlays. Right? They tell you, oh, look at what you could win if you bet 3. Look at all this money you can win. You could bet 100 on all 3 and win $650. But the problem with that is the odds of you winning all 3 are minuscule. And if you get lucky and hit one, the odds of you hitting another one after that are tiny. So they try to trap you. They try to train you into betting parlays because they know over time you're going to lose a lot of money betting parlays. And they're addictive. So I tell people stay away from parlays. The sharp bettors, as they call them, the sharps. There's the sharps and there's the average Joes. The average Joes are attracted to parlays, and Vegas knows this. The sharps do not play parlays in general. The sharps bet 1 fight, 1 game. They look for value like the stock market. And the great bettors, they hit 60%, 60, 65%, but they know which ones to play. They know where the value's at. Like I said, they dive deep into these lines. They have insider information, but they're not betting parlays. They're just not, because they know that's what the average Joes do. They know it's trapped. It's like the rat poison. How do you attract rats? The rat poison smells like cheese and it smells like peanut butter. But what happens when the rat gets close up to the rat poison and starts biting into it? It dies, or the rat trap is there and boom, smashes it, right? Smashes it. So stay away from parlays in general. They are not safer. They're more dangerous. There's a reason that Vegas offers them. They're traps. They're traps. Now you can win them. You can win them, and they're great paydays. But over time, the odds are not in your favor to win parlays and keep your head above water. Where the money is at is trying to find value. And look, if you only find value in 1 bet per month, then bet that 1 per month. All right. If there's nothing there, stay away. Just stay away. I tell people that in the articles. I'm staying away from this fight. I don't think there's any value here. You look for value. and fights. Let me get to some comments real quick. Converting the odds to a percentage makes them much easier to understand. Yeah, and you can do it that way too. Like I said, there's different ways to look at the odds in different countries as well. You can look at it fractionally. You can say 5-to-1 odds, toss ups. We look at minuses and pluses here in America. So to make it simpler, yeah, you can look at it in terms of odds. This is 50-50 here, 50%, 50%. When it comes to Canelo versus Gennady Golovkin, it's more like 75-25, something like that, 80-20. So that's another way to break it down and look at it. But what I want people mostly to take away from this is terminology: minus and plus. Minus is the favorite, plus is the underdog. Parlays, it's another one. They're generally traps. Stay away from parlays as much as you can, unless there's some sort of two-line parlay you like some people would like better Biev in the under. And we'll talk about over and unders in a minute. That would be a two. And this is getting more difficult, but some apps do not offer parlays on same fights. In other words, you would have to bet better Biev and say Robeisy Ramirez or something in a 2-fight parlay, but you cannot bet better Biev in the under. But if you can bet better Biev in the under, that would be a safer 2-game parlay to look at. And I love parlays, JC says, and that's a lot of people. Look, if I'm not trying to dissuade people, if you're just in this for fun and you're just in this to, if you're betting college football and you just want something to pay attention to and have fun with, and you want to put $25 down on a 3-game parlay just to pay attention on a Saturday and have something to be interested in, I'm not dissuading people from doing that. But if you're in this to make money over time, parlays is not the way to go. 5-fight parlay, go hard or go home. See, JC is getting crazy. He's getting crazy. But let me pull up another screen share here real quick, because I said, let me see. Here it is right here. And this is on my website, calixboxing.com. Y'all can see it right there. So I talked about looking at the line from the top to the bottom, the betting odds from top to bottom, in order to see how Vegas sees a fight playing out coming into the fight. And this is last week. This is the Vegas odds from top to bottom on Better Biev versus Joe Smith Jr. Now, if you look at the top line, minus 800, Joe Smith Jr. plus 550. What they're saying is Better Biev is a huge favorite coming in. Huge favorite. That's like 7.5 to 1, whatever it is, 8 to 1. Joe Smith Jr., a big underdog. You have to bet $800 in order to win 100 on Better Biev. Joe Smith Jr., you can bet $100 and you win $550. Now, some people see value in Joe Smith Jr. there and say, hey, I'm going to put down $10 on Joe Smith Jr. I'm willing to lose it, and I'll win $55 if I were to win that bet, plus my money back. All right, so some people would see value in that, and that's why the line got closer. When the fight started, Joe Smith Jr. moved down to a plus 450 underdog. So the odds got tighter, and the reason being, when you have an underdog that's appealing to people, they'll throw down money on him leading up to the fight, and being that he's getting more money, the line is going to get closer. But the thing to take from this is Better Biev is the big favorite. Joe Smith Jr. is a big underdog in this fight. Now, this is underneath this is what's called prop bets. Prop bets, P-R-O-P, prop bets. This is when you start to get into results of fight. Not only who wins, but when they're going to win. Will the fight go the distance? That's a big one in boxing. And on top of that, over, under. These are called prop bets. All right, so with Better Biev, the most likely scenario, according to Vegas, was Better Biev by stoppage, minus 280. Anything under that was less likely by far. Better Biev by decision is plus 360. Vegas is saying that it's likely not going to be a Better Biev decision. Joe Smith Jr. by stoppage was an even bigger underdog, plus 900. Joe Smith Jr. by decision, an even bigger underdog, plus 1100. So what Vegas is telling you here is, if you look at Smith by decision and up, that they're telling you a story here that Beterbiev is going to win this fight by stoppage at some point. That's what you read into this so far. Now, if you look even further into the odds, you go even deeper down that rabbit hole. Will the fight go the distance? Yes, plus 275. Remember, plus is underdog. No, minus 380. What Vegas is telling you right there is they don't think this fight is going the distance. The fight not going the distance is a big underdog. The fight going the distance is a heavy favorite. Or the fight not going the distance is a heavy favorite. Now, if you look even deeper, this is what I love to play, over-unders. I love it in college football because college football has turned into shootouts, high scoring. I love playing overs in college football. I've had a lot of success that way. And with boxing as well. Over under 8.5 rounds. Now, these aren't just arbitrary numbers. And the over under is never the same fight by fight. So they don't just split it up the middle and say the under is 6 rounds, over 6 rounds is the over. They pick a number. They don't pick it arbitrarily. They look at trends coming in. And they look at the stylistic matchup. So what happened here was Vegas priced the over under at 8.5. And what this simply means is, and you see even money here, minus 115, minus 115. It's even money. It's a toss-up whether this goes over 8.5 rounds or under 8.5 rounds. Now, the first thing to remember here is 8.5 rounds is not the 8th round. It's the completion of the 8th round plus another half. So the over-under cuts off halfway through the 9th round. When we're in the 9th round, 1 minute and 30 seconds, that's the over-under right there. And what Vegas is telling you here is they thought this fight was going to go deep. If you look at the full picture here, they thought Beterbiev is going to win the fight, and they think that Beterbiev is going to win the fight late. And the reason they thought that, and what I wrote up here is, if you look at the trends coming in, and Vegas looks at trends, and great bettors look at trends, Beterbiev's last 3 stoppages were 10th round, 9th round coming into the Joe Smith Jr. fight. Joe Smith Jr.'s last 7 fights, 6 of them ended 9th round or later. 4 of them went to decision. So only one of Joe Smith Jr.'s fights leading up to this fight in the past 7, and that's like 3-4 years, ended before the 9th round. So Vegas thought coming in clearly when you look at these odds that Beterbiev was going to win by late stoppage. They didn't know when, but they thought clearly that it was going to be a late stoppage. Now, if you thought Beterbiev was going to come in and wreck Joe Smith Jr., then you see value in the under. You see value in the under. And the thing about trap bets, on Caesars Sportsbook last week, they threw out what I thought was a trap bet. It's enticing. Like I said, it's like rat poison. When you see something that's too good to be true, generally it's too good to be true. It's rat poison. It's going to collapse on you. It's enticing, but it's going to collapse on you. So what happened was they threw out what's called an odds booster, odds boost. They put out a bet plus 300 for Beterbiev to win by stoppage in the first 6 rounds. So if Beterbiev wins by stoppage, knockout, TKO, whatever it may be, in rounds 1 through 6, you get a big $300 payout if you were to bet 100, plus 300. And usually they trap people into betting those because they see something. So when I saw that, I'm thinking, I'm not jumping on that because that's a trap. This fight's going to go late. But what happened? Beterbiev came in and wrecked Joe Smith Jr. in the 2nd round. And whoever bet on that odds boost got a nice payout. And Vegas usually isn't wrong like that, but they were wrong on this fight. They thought this fight was going late. They priced the over-under at 8.5 rounds. They did that because they thought the fight was going late, and it did not. Better BF came in and stopped Joe Smith Jr. early in the fight. So if you saw value in the under coming into this fight, you won nice. You won nicely on this fight. But they priced the over under. It's not an arbitrary number and it's not cut down the middle. The over under tells you a story on if the fight is going to go late, if it's going to go early. Dubois, one good example to use was Dubois versus Bryan the other week. They priced the over and under at 3.5 rounds. So what they were telling you was Dubois was going to win by early stoppage, and it did. And the over barely hit. The over went like 20 seconds over the over in the 4th round. And they were right about that one. It was right on that line. And what these lines tell you right here is Vegas thought that Beterbiev was going to win by late stop. They thought that Joe Smith Jr. was going to have his moments early. There was going to be a close fight, entertaining fight. But as each round went on, Beterbiev was going to start to have his way with him. The reason they thought that is Beterbiev is, once again, trends. He's a guy who's a slow starter, notoriously. Throws only 29 punches per round, first 2 rounds of fights. But as the fight goes on, his output goes up and he methodically breaks his opponents down. So they thought, if you look at this picture from top to bottom, that once the 8th round, 9th round came around, that things were going to start to get dicey for Joe Smith Jr. And that's why they priced the line there. Another thing you'll see in boxing is if they think the fight's definitely going over, like say if you had Paulie Malignaggi versus another light puncher, they know that fight's going the distance unless something freaky happens. So they'll price the over-under at 10.5 rounds. And not only will they price the over-under at 10.5 rounds, they'll make the odds so you don't win much money if you bet the over, if you bet the fight going decision. So they're not going to give you any value plays if something is obvious like that. But here, where the value would have been, if you're looking at this, we're looking at value. Remember, you look at it like a stock market. You don't bet with your heart. You don't just willy-nilly bet every weekend. You look at value. And the value in here is where? The value is in the under. Because the odds were minus 115, which means if you would have bet $115, you win 100 back. It's close to even odds. Anything else, you wouldn't have won much money on unless you bet a ton of money. If you would have bet Beterbiev minus 800, unless you're betting thousands of dollars, you're not winning much money. If you would have bet Beterbiev by stoppage, you don't win much money at minus 280. So not much value in those plays and not much value in Smith because Smith wasn't going to win the fight. So the value here would have been in the under. And one last thing real quick that I wanted to share, also up on my website right now, and I dropped it today, the updated version, is these are some facts about the current belt situation in boxing right there. If y'all can see that, let me get to some comments real quick. Parlays on college are not bad bets, especially in underdog play. Upsets happen often. Upsets happen a lot in college football, and those overplays hit a lot, especially when you start to talk about Big 12 football, Pac-12 football, stuff like that. There's a lot of value out there. But I generally try to stay away from the parlays. Betting Shakur Stevenson by unanimous decision is smart money if you got the bread every time. Just saying. The thing is, you got to bet a lot of money to get anything back on plays like that. I prefer to look at over-unders because they're closer to even odds. On top of that, and I get a pretty good feel coming in how long a fight's going to go. And obviously I was wrong about that with Beterbiev because I thought the fight was going to go later. But also I like to look at guys who are healthy underdogs because you get that in boxing, right? You get lines that are way too wide coming in. So if you find it, I'll give you an example. I went to Vegas for Canelo versus Floyd Mayweather Jr. back in 2013, I think that was. And Danny Garcia was fighting Lucas Matisse. And I went there and I saw the odds and I was like, that can't be right. It can't be right. I thought it was a trap at first. And then Danny Garcia was a plus 280 underdog. Meaning, what does that mean? Plus is the underdog. So that means if you bet $100, you win $280 plus your $100 back against Lucas Matisse. And Danny Garcia ended up upsetting Lucas Matisse. I like looking at value in healthy underdogs. That's what I like, trying to spot those underdogs that I can win, make value plays in, and they're out there in boxing. Don't forget about our $50 bet when Spence beats Bud. Oh, I'm not forgetting. I'm not forgetting my guy Chauncey Pearls either. Not forgetting that. You thought the fight was going late. You overthink it, bro. Yep, I did. The trends were going late, and that's just not what happened. You're right. Hoping they announce Spence Crawford soon, and I really hope the odds makers have Bud a solid favorite. Spence is going to whoop Bud. You're wrong. You're wrong. You should do college football videos. I've tried that in the past, and I'll probably get back to that in September. But I try to keep this channel mostly boxing because I know how boxing fans get when we talk about non-boxing stuff. But here are some facts about belts. And remember, we only talk about the real belts on this channel. 68 belts. We have 17 weight classes, 4 belts per weight class, 4 legitimate belts. Anything else is called a Reggie belt. It's called a JV trinket. It's non-existent here. It doesn't exist. We don't recognize it. And no boxing fan should recognize these belts. No boxing fan should recognize David Benavidez as a champion at 168 because he's not. No boxing fan should recognize Tank Davis as a champion at 135 because he's not. Anybody parading around as a champion at 140, not named Josh Taylor right now, is a fraud champion. But here's some facts about the real belts in boxing. And I did belt counts by standings, by country. 19 belts are held by USA right now. They're gold. UK is second, silver with 9 belts. Japan owns 8 belts. Mexico owns 8 belts. Ukraine owns 4 belts. And you can go all the way down the line. There are no American champions north of 160 pounds. So no American champions north of middleweight. So from 168 up to heavyweight, you're not going to find an American champion. There are no American champions south of 115 where Bam Rodriguez is a champion. 112, 108, 105, you're not going to find any American champions. But what this full picture tells you geographically is the middle weight classes. That's where USA is right now. USA owns 16 of the 24 belts between 130 and 160. So between junior lightweight and middleweight, USA is largely dominating. You have exceptions at 140 with Josh Taylor. So you have some exceptions, but for the most part, USA is dominant from junior lightweight up to middleweight, owning 16 of the 24 major belts in boxing. So the middleweight classes is where it's at in America. And it makes sense, right? Because of a lot of your larger athletes are in football or power forwards in basketball. A lot of your lower weight classes are dominated by other countries, which we're about to get into. Asia owns more than half, 11 of the 20 belts between 105 and 118. Japan in particular owns 8 of the belts between 105 and 118. Japan is dominant down there. And it makes sense, right? That's what they focus on. It's what they focus on because that's most of the population. And I'm married to an Asian woman, so I can say this. They're height challenged Asian fighters. So you're going to find a lot of Asian fighters congregated in the lower weight classes as opposed to upper weight classes. And you have exceptions, Murata at 160 being one of them. But most of your all of your legit champions coming from Asia are all in the lower weight class. And I love watching those guys fight because they're just firecrackers down there, man. They know how to box. They know how to punch. They're entertaining. It's fun to watch. And I think people who don't focus on the lower weight classes are missing out big time because that's where a lot of the action is. And that's where you get a lot of your even money fights. Speaking of betting. Let's see. Should be 1 champion per division. And I'm not against per sanctioning body. The reason I'm not against the 4 belt system is because they were set up to represent different parts of the world, right? The reason the WBA, which was originally the NBA, like basketball in the 1920s was set up because they felt like American fighters weren't getting their just due. So they set up the National Boxing Association, which turned into the WBA as it became a more global sport in the 60s. Then in the 60s, you had the WBO set up shop, I believe, because they felt like there was American bias and this was becoming a more universal sport. So we need fighters universally represented. And then in the 80s, the IBF was set up because they felt like there was a non-American bias going on. So the IBF set up shop and started to reward American fighters as their champions, a la Marvin Hagler, Larry Holmes, guys like that. And then I believe the WBC was set up in the late 80s after that. So you have 4 belts, and the WBC is mostly Latin American champions. That's what it's been in its history anyway. They felt like there was an anti-Latin American bias, so they set up shop as the WBC. And so I'm not against the 4-belt system as long as it works how it was intended to work, with rankings that are not corrupt, with ranking system that works, with a mandatory system that works, and 1 belt per sanctioning bodies. But it's gotten out of control. And that's why we don't recognize the Reggie belts here, because that clouds the situation. I know guys like Mike and Ruiz were born in the States, but they claim their titles from Mexico. Franco and Bam are 2 others. And that's why I said when I set this up that I'm doing the standings determined by nationality of fighter, not current residence. And I consider Bam Rodriguez an American fighter. Surprising that Japan has that many champs. Good for Japan. Their fighters are some of the most exciting to watch. I think Japan has 5 champions and 8 belts, which is impressive. What about unearned titles? Who do guys got, Bam or Rungvisai? And we'll be talking about that a lot starting tomorrow. Bam versus Rungvisai. I'm not sure what you mean as far as unearned titles, though. Is it me, or is Bam Rungvisai flying under the radar? It's going to be a great fight. It is, and it is because of the lower weight class thing. It's flying under the radar. But to finish this off, Puerto Rico has only 1 current world champion. 1. Puerto Rico has fallen off. Mexico has 5 world champions who own 8 belts. The Mexico versus Puerto Rico rivalry at the top level of boxing is currently dead. At the top level, when you start to have 5 Mexican champions and 1 Puerto Rican, 8 belts, and 1 Puerto Rican belt, 8 Mexican belts and 1 Puerto Rican belt. Mexico versus Puerto Rico at the top level right now is dead. It's not a rivalry. It's just not. It's like Alabama versus LSU in football. It's just become a non-rivalry. It's too one-sided right now. 2 belts are vacant, 1 at 140, and I think the other one's at 108. And Latin America has 11 world champions. And if you want to go on see the full standings, it's up on my website, calixboxing.com. But on that note, man, I appreciate y'all tuning in. I appreciate everybody in the archive, as this is an educational video, and I'm pretty sure it's going to get good views on archives, but I appreciate y'all tuning in. I'll be back later with some more. God bless.